Alpine.js is a JavaScript library that lets you add client-side interactivity to your website. It's simple and lightweight, yet so powerful. It's kinda like React, Vue, and Angular, but much simpler. You can also think of it like modern-day jQuery, as they state in their own website. So Alpine.js consists only of 3 elements. These are attributes, properties, and methods. So attributes are like special HTML attributes that you can add to your HTML elements. Properties are like magic variables you can access inside the attributes, and methods are functions, aka methods you can use inside a script tag or a JavaScript file. If any of this doesn't make much sense, don't worry, because if you watch this video, everything will eventually make sense. So right now I'm in a completely new HTML website. So I have very simple HTML structure consisting of HTML head, body, and for the first section of this tutorial, we are gonna attempt to create a responsive navbar with Alpine.js. To not waste your time, I have already included all predefined CSS for the styling of this project. So if you want to follow along, you can just copy over all these styles from the description box. So stick with me as we are going to start building our responsive navbar with Alpine.js. We are going to start with creating a very basic navbar, and for this I need to add a simple nav tag. Inside of it will be a div with class name, container, and nav-container. Inside of it will be a simple logo, and below that will be our nav links. So this will be a div with class name, nav links. We will have few links here. Home, about, and contact. If we save, you see the everything appeared here. Below it we will have a button called hamburger. This is our hamburger button. It's just for responsiveness, this button you click to display the menu on mobile devices. You will see how it looks like. So this one is already styled in my style.css file. You don't have to worry about its styling. So you just add 3 spans here and it will work out of the box. But if you see here, of course, it's not styled because we still we have to import our style.css files first. And now if we save, you see everything is styled correctly. And this button is not showing because we already hid it from style.css because it shouldn't appear on desktop. But if we reduce the size of this window, you see it appeared, the hamburger button. What we are seeking to achieve with Alpine.js is that when you click on this button, it should display a large hamburger menu with the links that were already showing in the desktop version. So I'm gonna scale this down to mobile version because now we are gonna work with Alpine.js to make this responsive. So what exactly do we want to achieve with Alpine.js? I want that if I click on this button, it will add a class name called active to my nav element. So if I try to add that class name manually here, like this, watch what happens. The navbar menu is open. So this is exactly what we want to achieve with Alpine.js. And you're gonna see how simple it is to achieve such thing in Alpine.js in a moment. So first I need to copy over my script for Alpine.js. I will put it in the head tag like this. And of course you can copy this over from Alpine.js official website. And now our application has full access to Alpine.js JavaScript library. So how do we do this? First, we need to define a state for our nav element. In order to do this in Alpine.js, we are gonna use our first attribute, which is x-data. Our navbar can either be open or not open. So our state variable will be called isOpen, and initially it's gonna be false. So we have to define our state inside a curly braces like this. Like this, we have defined our state, but notice that the data defined in x-data will only be accessible to this element and its children. So if I add a new element here, like main, and add a paragraph, give it like lorem 100, like this. I just can just quickly add a container class here. Now since we defined is open in the nav element, it is not accessible to the main element. It's only accessible to nav and its children. But x-data job is not only to define state, it's also used to tell Alpine.js that this element we are in, the nav element, will be an Alpine.js component. So in order for any Alpine.js feature to be accessible, you have to define x-data. You have to add x-data even if it's gonna be an empty attribute like this for Alpine.js features to work in that element and its children. And of course, you can just go ahead and define the whole body tag as an Alpine.js element by adding s-data, but of course, this is not the best practice. It's in your best interest to add Alpine.js to only the components that need it. This will make more sense later in this tutorial, so stick with me. Now we have defined our isOpen state, but we haven't done anything with it. What I want to do here is when I click on this hamburger button, it should change this isOpen to true. So here I'm gonna add a new Alpine.js attribute called x-on click. And here we can add any function you want. So, or any JavaScript you want. So let's just try first with alert hello world and see what happens. Now save, and now if I click here, it will alert hello world. You can really add any JavaScript code you want here. But what I want to do here instead is to set isOpen to true. So for that, all I need is to type in isOpen equal true. It is that simple. This way it will modify that variable from false to true. So now when I click, you see nothing happens because yes, the variable is changing, but I didn't tell it to do anything with the variable. But first, I want to add a few notes on this x-on attribute. X-on listens to a specific event. So for example, you can add x-on abort, blur, and change, and plenty of JavaScript events. It's basically like document.add event listener, and all the events are available to you here. It also takes something called modifiers. So you can just add a dot and you will see a list of modifiers you can add. So for example, e.prevent is the famous e.prevent default, and e.stop is the famous e.stop propagation, and .away is basically a very nice modifier. It lets you handle any event of clicking away from an element, and we used to write some not so complicated, but like somehow complicated JavaScript code to achieve this functionality. By the way, to have all these nice auto completions, you have to install VS Code extension called Alpine.js. It's called Alpine.js Intelligence. If you install it, you will get all these nice auto completions for Alpine.js. You can also listen to any other event like the key-up event. This one is for catching keyboard input, and this will listen to any keyboard or key-up event. To target a specific event, all you need to do is to add a modifier with the dot. Yeah, I think it should. I think the intelligence is wrong here, but we will use this actually later in this tutorial, so we will make sure later. But for now, just know that you can add modifier like this to target a specific key up, like the enter key. And now to our application, we actually just need to set isOpen to true upon click on the hamburger button. So now when I click on it, it will set isOpen to true, but nothing is happening, and it's not showing anything in the UI because I'm not telling it to. We have to tell it to dynamically add the class active to our navbar. isOpen is set to true. So remember that I want to set the class here to active. To do this, we will introduce a new Alpine.js attribute called x-bind class, and all we have to do is to add a ternary operator like this is open. If it's open, set class name to active, otherwise don't set any class name, and save. And now if you check again, it works out of the box. And you can actually also add a class, normal class name here. So don't worry, they will not override each other or conflict with each other. However, now we don't have any way to close this menu. So what I'm going to do is to add a simple button here with the class name hamburger dash close, which will handle the closing of this menu. Now we check. Open again. Yeah, we have this button, and I have to tell it to close the hamburger menu by simply setting x dash on, click to set is open, back to false. Now I hit save, and now if I try to open the menu and close it again, I can open and close it however I want. Now, before moving on to the next section, allow me to talk about shorthands in Alpine.js. Alpine.js provides several shorthand syntaxes, also called magic shortcuts or directive shorthand, for many of its directives, aka attributes. These attributes are also called directives. So, for example, the shorthand for x-on click is just an at symbol at click like this. So if I change all x-on click to at click, it will still work. So now I save and try. Yeah, everything is still working fine. And there is also a shorthand for binding class name or for x-bind in general, and it's just a colon like this. So now if I change every x dash, it's actually just one. If I change it to a colon class, it will still work. So now I save and I try again. Yeah, everything is still working as is. So don't get confused when you see these shorthands. It's generally a matter of personal preference which syntax you use. The functionality remains exactly the same. Just be consistent with your project to maintain code readability. I prefer to use the shorthands, so from now on we will use it for the rest of this tutorial. In this lesson, we learned about x-data, x-bind, and x-on. So stick with me because in the next one we are going to learn about x-text, x-show, and x-transition. Now we are going to build a simple drop-down list to learn the new attributes, which are x-show, x-transition, x-text, and click with the modifier .outside. But first let me fix something here real quick. I need to remove this class name, add a div with class container, and include this paragraph inside it. Yeah, now it adds this nice margin and coming from style.css. So to create our dropdown, we simply need to add a new div with class name dropdown, and we are gonna need a button to display our dropdown with the class name dropdown dash button. This one is gonna say open dropdown, and inside of it will be our actual dropdown content, which will be a div with the class name dropdown dash content. We are gonna add you know what, let's just copy these over, copy them over here, and now we have a simple drop down list. So obviously what we want to achieve here is to hide this element when we close drop down and open it again when we click on the drop down. We also want this text to show open drop down if the drop down is closed, and show close drop down if it's already open. And now, exactly as with our navbar, we are gonna give this one a x-data attribute. Remember, why do we do this? First, we do this to define this element as an Alpine.js component, and second, we do it to store our state. So this one's also gonna take is open equal to false by default, and simply when I click on add click, what this should do is toggle is open by setting it to the reverse of is open. So if it's true, it will be false, and if false, it will be true. And here in the actual drop-down content, we are gonna introduce a new Alpine.js attribute called x-show. This basically hides an element if it's passed a false value and shows it if it's passed a true value. So here we simply need to pass is open, and as you see, when I hit save, the drop down was closed because is open is set to false by default. But when I click open drop down, it will open it for me, and if I click it again, it will close it again. We could have given it a class name to handle the active state exactly like the navbar, and this would work as well. But I didn't do this because here I want to show you another way to show or hide an element conditionally, which is x-show. So basically here we are telling it to show the element if and only if is open is true. But now we want this to read close dropdown because the dropdown is already open. So here I will introduce a new Alpine.js attribute called x-text. And here I will pass another simple ternary operator. So if it is open, it should read close dropdown. Otherwise, it should read open dropdown. And now it's save and I try to open the dropdown, and as you see, it showed the correct text, close dropdown. But I think the transition from closed to open is so rough. Let's add a smooth transition with Alpine.js attribute called x-transition. So we need to add this attribute to the element that will have the transition. In this case, it's our dropdown content. So we just simply need to add x-transition like this. Hit save, and as you see now, it works out of the box. We now have a smooth transition for our dropdown content. But something looks off. It looks like the element appears from the middle, which feels wrong from the perspective of a user because the button is on the left. To fix this, let's change our transition origin. It's center by default, so let's change it to top left, and we do this by adding a simple modifier. And remember, in Alpine.js, any modifier is added after a dot, so like this. So here I can add a dot, origin dot top dot left. And now if I try again, if I hit save and try again, you see now it looks correct. The transition is happening from the top left here because our element in the top left. Each attribute, aka directive in Alpine.js, has a lot of modifiers, but we are not gonna explore all of them here because you are not gonna need all of them anyway, so this would be a waste of your time. I'm just giving you the essentials you need to build a website with Alpine.js, and then you can always refer to the documentation while you build your website to check for any other modifier or attribute you need. Now, another important feature we need to add to our dropdown is to close it whenever the user clicks away from the dropdown itself. For this, there is a very useful modifier in Alpine.js called .outside, which is added on the click attribute. So if I add here like this, add click .outside equal set is open to false, and try, hit save and try again. Now when I click away from the dropdown, it will close, but if I click anywhere in the dropdown itself, it will not close. In this lesson, we learned about x-text, x-show, and x-transition. So stick with me because in the next one, we are going to learn about x-model, x-for, and x-on key up. Now we're gonna build a simple to-do list. The HTML code for this is very simple. We just need to add a div with class name to-do list. Inside of it, there will be an input for typing the text for our to-do items. And below it, there will be a list of to-dos. And this is how it looks. Let me just wrap actually all of this inside container. It's a little more nice. I'll give this div class name container. Yeah, now everything looks more nice. Now for our to-do list to work, we need to define it first as an Alpine.js component. And we need to add two variables here. First one is new to do. And this will initially be an empty string. It will be mapped to this input here. So basically anything we type in this input will be reflected in this new to do variable. Second one is to-dos, which will be an empty array that we will add our to-do items to. And now, as I said, we want to connect this new to-do variable to our input here. This is very simple to do in Alpine.js. All you need to do is add an attribute called x-model, and its value will be simply new to do. Now if I hit save and start typing anything in this variable, nothing happens, but it's actually working behind the scenes. It's actually changing this new to-do text to whatever I typed in here. And we will see this in action very shortly. And now we want to use the key up event handler with the modifier enter to tell it to do something whenever user clicks enter on that input. And we will basically tell it to push the new to do. So all we need to do is add key up dot enter equal, and we will basically tell it to push the new to-do text to our to-dos array. So it will be to-dos dot push new to-do. Remember, where does this come from? It comes from the new to-do variable defined here. And also after the semicolon, it should reset new to-do back to an empty string. We hit save. Now the final thing we need to do is to display our to-do items. For this, we will use a new attribute called x-4 in the element we want to repeat. In our case, we want to repeat the li, so here we will add x-4, and this will take in to-do in to-dos. This one comes from the to-dos array defined here in our to-do list element. So here we are basically telling Alpine.js to loop over our to-dos array and display the li element multiple times. And now I will remove this text and add here x-text equal to do. So this one, the to do element refers to each to do in our to do's array. Now if I hit save, you see there is a small problem we need to fix. An empty li will be displayed because we have it in HTML and it's empty. So it will be displayed even though it's empty, and we don't want that. To fix it, we need to use the HTML tag called template and place the li inside this template. This tag basically hides the element inside it until we display it from JavaScript. In this case, Alpine.js will handle all of this for us. So now if I click save, you see the empty element is not shown anymore, and now our to-do list is fully working. You see if I click and type my new to-do item. Now if I hit enter, it's actually not working. Let's see why that. Yes, x-4 should actually be added to the template element. So here now when I try again, my new to do, and I hit enter, everything is working. So here whenever I hit enter in this input, it does two things. First, it will push my new to do item to the to do's array, and second thing, it will reset new to do back to an empty string. In this lesson, we have covered x-4 and x-model. So stick with me because in the next lesson, we are gonna cover properties and methods. Now we have covered all the important Alpine.js attributes or aka directives you need to be aware of. Now let's explore a few useful methods and properties from Alpine.js. The first one we will explain is $store. Remember when we said that if you define state inside x-data attribute, you can only access it inside this nav element and its children? Now, what do we do if we want all of our website to be able to access this state variable? This is when $store comes into use. It lets you define a global store and store any data you need there, and it will be accessible from anywhere in your website. For example, for the sake of demonstration, let's say I want to move isopen to a global store to be able to access it from any other element in my website. To do this, I first need to define my global state. To define a global state, we have to add a script tag or create a new JavaScript file, whatever you want. So here I will basically create a script tag inside my body tag. Then we now have to add our Alpine.js code inside an event listener that makes sure our Alpine.js script has fully loaded and it has been initialized. So for this, we're gonna type in document add event listener. Our event name is Alpine init, and we'll take a callback. And here, right here in this block, we can add any Alpine.js code we want. So here we will learn about our first method. It's called Alpine.store, and this is used to define a value in our local Alpine.js store. So here I'm gonna say is navbar open, and this will initially be set to false. And like this, now I have this value available for me to use anywhere in my website as a global value. To use it, we add our property called $store. So here I will first remove this. But remember, we have to keep our x-data attribute even if it's empty to define that this element is an Alpine.js component and can use Alpine.js features. So here I need to replace all is open to $store. This is our property. It's called a property. It's prefixed by a $sign. Any property is prefixed by a $sign. So here we use this property to access our store, and we simply access our value is navbar open. So replace it here, navbar open, dollar. This should be $store dot is navbar open, and here $store dot is navbar open. I hit save, and now if I check my website, it's actually not working. Why is that? I have a typo here. This should be navbar like this, and now hit save again. Try again. Now everything's working perfectly fine, even though I'm not using the navbar open from x-data, but I am rather using it from my global store. Now, the other magic property we want to explore today is $el. This basically refers to the current element. So let's say we add a random paragraph here. Paragraph, that says click me. I'll give it class paragraph, and on click I want this paragraph element to turn into red. So here what $el does is basically like JavaScript select element by class name or ID, but it will actually select the current element, so it will select this paragraph, and after that I can do anything I want with it. So for example, I can say $el dot style dot color equal red. I hit save, and now I have my paragraph. If I click on my paragraph, nothing happens. Why? Because we actually forgot to define that this paragraph element is an Alpine.js element, and again I have to do this by giving it the attribute x-data even if it's empty. And if I hit save and try again, it's actually working this time.